The GOP is looking at least the next 2 years being an absolute nightmare. And definitely this midterm election being absolutely terrifying. So much so that it made Marjorie Taylor Greene say, I'm gone. She didn't leave because of noble purposes. She left because it's clear. It's clear that every single day from now till November 2026, during the election, there is enough data that is just readily available right now to fill every single one of those days of that news cycle with a whole entire story on just the 20,000 emails that were turned over. Because those 20,000 emails are broken down into 2,300 threads, lines of communication, a person replying and then Epstein replying back and so forth. Those are 2,300 of those. 1,670 of those threads mention Donald Trump. That's 73% of the communications that Epstein was having in those 20,000 emails mention Donald Trump specifically. That's enough to fill communications all year long, because some of those communications include, like, stories about how much he charged for the girls, $15,000 a pop. And now the banking committee is looking into things Epstein, which is very simple. Did Donald Trump ever write a $15,000 check to Jeffrey Epstein, or anything related to Donald Trump relay a $15,000 check to Epstein? Because that is a night with the girls. Now, it gets even worse than that you have the release of banking records, that you have the release of the threads, the email threads, where 73% of them are connected to Donald Trump. She's looking around and she sees the girls, the victims, the Epstein girls, and yes, now we're finding out that there were boys too. There are Epstein girls and boys that were coming out saying that they were victims. And those victims are just, their stories alone are nightmarish. And the one problem that Marjorie Taylor Greene understood clearly, and I think anyone can be clear about, that yes, there are lots of people mentioned in the emails and will be coming out if the Justice Department ever decides to release the files that they have. Yes, there will be a few Democrats mentioned in, there will be a lot of Democrats even mentioned in the emails, that will be mentioned in the data, that will be mentioned in the banking records, that if the DOJ releases its information will be mentioned there. But the problem is, not one of those people will likely be an elected Democrat holding public office today. The problem is that the founder of MAGA, the founder of America First, the man who is in charge of the Republican Party, the man that the Republican Party has supported since 2015, has been the standard bearer of the Republican Party since he got elected in 2016. This man, who is in all of this information, is there. There is no Democrat that is the standard bearer today of the Democratic Party. There isn't any single person like that. There's definitely not anyone who is the current president of the United States. That doesn't exist, because there's only one president, and that president is Donald Trump, Republican, MAGA, America First. Nothing will change that. She's looking at that. And then she was like, okay, well, is there another thing that we could possibly do to be able to talk about something positive that isn't Jeffrey Epstein every single day going over the 73% of the threads from the 20,000 emails, the banking records, and that the victims are going to be talking about, and that New York will probably be releasing more information. And you have a Democratic mayor who is a Democratic socialist, which means that person doesn't care if millionaires and billionaires' lives are destroyed because of the release of the information. He will probably be releasing information. The Democratic governor will be a little less likely to release information of New York because Democrats could be impacted. Zoran Mamdani doesn't give a damn one way or the other because he's a Democratic socialist. He doesn't give a damn if major Democrats are injured. He doesn't care. There is absolutely no loyalty that that man possesses. There might be slight loyalties to the governor because the governor might not want people knowing that, like, maybe she took money from people who are residents of New York who had fun with Epstein. That's a reality. So she might not want to, but Zoran Mamdani doesn't care. So this is things that that made Marjorie Taylor Greene walk, because that you cannot control. And she was like, okay, well, is there something else? And there was like, okay, we have a health care plan. Because if we have a health care plan, maybe we can talk about something positive while Democrats are using Epstein. There's no Republican health care plan, and health care prices may triple unless we go out there and support the Affordable Care Act subsidies, which is going to ultimately happen because there isn't a Republican option. And Republicans either can triple healthcare costs on everyone and injure everyone in all of their constituents, because it won't just be those people in the Affordable Care Act that get injured. Those people who don't have health care don't go to hospitals, and that shuts down hospitals everywhere. Hospitals will have much less income because there'll be much less people who will be able to avoid going to the doctor. They can't afford to go to the doctor. And if they can't afford to go to the doctor, then hospitals shut down because people won't go. She knows this. She sees this coming. She realizes that the next year will be about affordability and Epstein. And all of that will be surrounding Trump, and she is terrible to Trump. And so she probably asked Trump, are you going to do the honorable thing, Mr. President? Resign. Do what Nixon did. Because the honest truth is, there are enough votes if you get connected to Epstein to impeach and remove you. Are you willing to step down? And when Trump probably looked at her and said, you're a traitor for asking me that, and she just went, I'm out of here. And she's going to try to come back in 28, and that's why more Republicans will want to join her, because you can't defend a pedophile. And even if the Justice Department blocks the release, there's a lot of other data to maintain the discussion, and then always asking the question, why isn't the Department of Justice releasing the files? It just keeps going and destroying the Republican Party in the Republican Party's name. It is gone. It is toast. It is vapor. That is an inevitability. Nothing is going to stop that from happening. Nothing is going to stop people's prices going up unless, of course, the Affordable Care Act subsidy is extended. She knows this, and therefore she left. Now, there will be others who will join her, because no one wants to spend an entire year defending pedophilia. The problem is, if as much as 3 Republicans resign, possibly 4 Republicans resign, Democrats will pick up the majority. This is the nightmare that the Republican Party is facing, and everyone running is facing, because no one wants to run in a race where your opponent is going to be asking you about your pedophile president, about the pedophile leader of your party, your Epstein friend leader of your party. Where, yes, there may be some Democrats, none of those people that will be released will be the leader of the Democratic Party. This is the nightmarish hell Republicans are in. But they are in this because of not having ethics and honor. You need to have an ethical basis by not having background checks and security checks, because a background check would have detected Trump and his relationship to Epstein. A security check would have detected his relationship. It probably would have even detected Trump's true financial difficulties with regard to his business and the fact that his businesses were found guilty of insurance fraud, bank fraud, and tax fraud. And that's just with the state of New York, and that's growing with interest, as we're probably getting close to $450, $500 million is what Trump owes to those fines. That having that kind of debt on him they would have said you are bribable and violated a security check. The fact that he also owes to E. Jean Carroll, probably close to $100 million because of all the interest that's being gathered. He has to pay that. A basic security check would have said you cannot be president because your debts are that massive, and anyone willing to write you a check for $50 or $100 million, you're going to dance to, because that's $100 million that you don't have to pay to the state of New York. And that is nothing. Like, when he goes back, the IRS portion of that tax fraud, insurance fraud, bank fraud that his company was found guilty of, we don't yet know how much he owes to the federal government because of his tax fraud. These are huge issues. And again, if we just had background checks, if we just had national security checks for people who hold office in DC, much like you have in all 50 states, if that was the case, Trump would not be president and we would not be dealing with this. Like, share, subscribe. Let's debate. Thank you much.